I'll introduce our speaker for the evening. Uh, it's our very own Adam Stevens. He's a designer in the truest sense of the word and might be the guy that I think wears the most hats around this town I know, from design, photography, writing, real estate. This is a guy that does a lot, including sitting as secretary for our chapter. So he's involved with many programs around the city, along with being one of the founders of the annual Denver Modernism Week. Um, and I believe also he's the most qualified person to speak on our subject tonight. And I think you'll see why. Uh, so with that, let's welcome our speaker, Adam Stevens, and his talk titled Cliff May's Prefab Ranch Homes in Denver. Adam.
Thank you very much. And so, welcome everybody. And I hope a lot of you are here in interest in learning more about the Cliff May homes. And Josh, can you hear me okay? Is my audio good? All right. So, normally, so actually, let me start with just saying I have actually lived in a Cliff May home, which I'm not at right now, for 16 years now. And when we bought our house back 16 years ago, we had no idea who Cliff May was. We just thought the house was really intriguing and decided that it's the place we wanted to make home. And one of the things that you'll see as I get into my talk is one of the reasons we wanted to make it a home is we hadn't even walked in the front door yet when we decided we were buying the house. We had walked through the gate to the courtyard of the house, which is an original feature of all Cliff May homes, and it was right there that we said, "This is really cool." And uh, ever since then, about 6 years in, 10 years ago, I actually decided to start doing some research to find out what these unique homes are, and came to discover they were designed by this guy named Cliff May. And ever since then, I have been doing research, learning about the Cliff May homes here in Denver and also outside of Colorado. And my focus has really been trying to find and document all of the Cliff May homes outside of California. They were built in several cities around the country. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into it. Um, but yeah, so I've been doing a lot of research on this stuff, as Josh pointed out. So here's a picture of a Cliff May home right here. If you're unfamiliar with what they are, and the Cliff May homes in Denver are located in the southwest Denver neighborhood of Harvey Park, and this is an aerial photograph taken of Harvey Park sometime probably around 1955 when the Cliff May homes were built. And Harvey Park was at that time an enormous singular subdivision. Um, it was substantially built between 1954 and 1956, although construction did continue on some level until the early 60s, but most of it was done by 56. And that included a total of over 4,000 homes. There are currently 4,300 houses in the Harvey Park area. So it's a really big subdivision. And it's an interesting subdivision. For those of you who are in Denver, what we're looking at here is we're looking toward the east. This road here on the left is Jewel. This road right here, actually, no, sorry, this road right here is present day Federal Boulevard. This road here is Lowell, which actually represents the border of Harvey Park, the east border. This is future Yale. Um, and then over here is Sheridan Boulevard. So you can see you're way out in the country here back in the 1950s. And in fact, the subdivision continues well over to the right side of my screen here. This photo doesn't even cover the whole neighborhood. And the Cliff May homes are located right here, this little rectangle here. So you can see they're only a small part of this whole subdivision. So among those 4,300 homes, uh, given the time that they were built, we'd often refer to Harvey Park as a post-war neighborhood, and oftentimes that brings up notions of cheaply built houses to house soldiers coming back from World War II. But actually, most of those houses were built in the 1940s, and actually, there's a neighborhood of those here called Burns Brentwood that really were homes that were affordable, quickly built, trying to accommodate people as quickly as possible. But Harvey Park was really built at a time where those same soldiers were coming back, starting families, seeing upward mobility. They had more money to spend on a home. They had good jobs, and they were really looking for what the next step for their families were going to be. And so the builders of Harvey Park, of which there were several, were trying to be the answer to that question. It was the way they marketed their homes was less about, oh, we're just trying to house you, and more about this is a quality of life issue. And all of them, I think Harvey Park is a great example of the best of what was happening in housing in the mid 1950s. And so just to give you an example here, one of the builders was Casey Enser. He built 500 homes in Harvey Park, and these are examples of what he was building. He was building these kind of old world style bungalow homes, although he had a tri-level model, which wouldn't have been typical in a bungalow. And they were also built in a more traditional manner. Instead of using stud construction, they actually used double masonry construction. So concrete block walls with then a brick veneer on the outside, plaster interiors. And so they were trying to build like a solid they were appealing to people by offering this really solid kind of old world style home. There were several other builders offering what we would consider your traditional brick ranch, of which most of Harvey Park is comprised of these. These were some of the smaller builders here, and then the big one was Hutchinson Homes, who built about 2,500 of the houses in the neighborhood. And so, when a lot of people think of Harvey Park, they're thinking of these brick Hutchinson homes. And here's a photograph of some of the Hutchinson homes that are actually running down the hill south of Yale. And then there were also an offering of contemporary homes, what we today call mid century modern homes in Harvey Park. And in the past decade or so, Harvey Park has actually developed a reputation for being a destination for those who want a mid century modern home. And these houses are among those that have put Harvey Park on the map that way. But honestly, only of the 4,300 homes in Harvey Park, only 530 of them are mid-century modern. So about 12% of the neighborhood is actually a mid-century modern home. One of the builders was Lou Carey, and he offered the Carey Holiday Homes. These were actually designed by the Denver firm of Norton and Polivnik, and they were these cool houses with these glass gables, post and beam construction, brick exteriors, a really kind of unique forward-looking design. And it was kind of unusual, the number that Carey even got built here in the neighborhood, because one of the problems builders were having in the 1950s is, everybody was getting their financing from the VA and the FHA. And the VA and the FHA were not particularly interested in contemporary homes. They had a tendency to underappraise mid-century modern homes and wouldn't loan the amounts really needed to buy the houses, because they felt like they were trendy and they felt like they weren't going to hold their value. And to a great extent, they really quelled the amount of mid-century modern homes that were ultimately built in the 50s and beyond. But I want you to know one thing here. I was talking about it being a quality of life issue. Notice the wording used in this copy, like now, an exciting new home that offers you a new way of life. Another ad here too, same builder, thrilling in every sense of the word. And then it goes on to talk about the homes being as exciting as a parade, breathtaking as a mountain view, thrilling as a holiday. That's a Carey Holiday home. Here's a picture of one of the holiday homes inside during the 1950, I think this is the 55 parade of homes. So you can see dramatic vaulted ceilings, this glass gable, very unusual, a very quite a departure from the normal homes that were being built in the 1950s. And then, of course, we have the Cliff May homes, which is what we'll be talking about today. And of course, the ads for the Cliff May homes have that similar language on the left hand side. The home your dream built, designed by Cliff May. And then I like this little paragraph because it kind of sums the whole thing up. It says, built upon a firm foundation of contemporary needs, Cliff May homes achieve their essential livability through the Western ranch informality for which Cliff May is nationally famous. So, it's really fun to live in a Cliff May home. The most modern planning saves you more of your time for relaxation and recreation. Here, you and your family are indoors and out of doors. Patio and garden are distinctively blended into your living area. It is truly a home plan to give the whole family a wonderful opportunity to LIVE. And so that's really the idea. It's the idea that this isn't just a house, this is a new way of living. And I think more than a lot of the mid century modern homes in Harvey Park and elsewhere, these homes really achieved that. And that's why I've been so interested in studying these houses because, as I mentioned, this is a prefabricated system, as I mentioned in the title of this talk. Um, One of the things that I love about modern architecture is that it's more than just the style. Modernism as the style is, you know, it's exciting, but it's not really why I love modern architecture. Why I love modern architecture is that all of the designs of modern architecture have ideas behind them. And these houses are filled with ideas, which we're going to talk about as we move along here. So this is a photograph of Cliff May. And normally my talk here is like an hour, but I'm cutting it back because our meeting would go on forever if I were to go over everything. So I'm just going to gloss a little bit over who Cliff May was. But he was born in Southern California, in the San Diego area, to a family who had been in the California, Mexico area there for many generations. And so a lot of people would call him a real native Californian. He is not an architect. He actually didn't even graduate college, although he did attend college. Um, but he actually wanted to become a musician. He started a big band called the Cliff May Orchestra and did that in college and ultimately left college without graduating because he was just antsy to get on with his life. Um, he ended up starting to build furniture that he was knocking off from a local furniture store. And he managed to get the furniture he was building into model homes for a local builder. And one thing like led to another, and those pieces of furniture that he was building, which this was actually during the depression that he was building this furniture and these home builders are trying to sell these homes, but they were actually selling with his furniture in it, and one thing led to another, and he actually ended up starting to design homes for this builder and breaking off and developing homes himself as he went on with his career. He then started designing custom homes for people, and he started getting commissions. And even though we are talking about Cliff May, and often most people are talking about Cliff May in the context of these prefabricated homes, the prefabricated homes were only about a 10-year or less portion of his career. A majority of Cliff May's career was spent designing big, beautiful homes for the rich and famous. He This is one example of a home that he designed in Tucson. This is called the Ocotillo House. And you can see he has a very interesting style. Much of his inspiration for design was based on the old California ranch homes. And when I say ranch homes, I mean homes on ranches that had a Mexican vernacular to them, where it was a home, built around the courtyard where the family would come together, and then the functions of the home would operate around that courtyard. And so that notion always drove his design, his home designs. And it meant that his home designs also had a very rustic look to them. So you can see he's using this kind of rustic stone, the exposed beams, exposed aggregate concrete on the floor, and yet this wall of glass makes this house very strikingly modern. A couple more photographs of it. You can see for the eaves, he's actually using grape stakes here on the eaves, and this wonderful bedroom here. And this is very typical of Cliff May's style and of many of the homes that he designed for people. Aside from designing homes, Cliff May also had a couple of commercial commissions. He designed Sunset magazines, corporate headquarters, which they only just moved out of a couple of years ago. And he designed the Robert Mondavi Winery, also in Northern California. He also he also got to meet Frank Lloyd Wright, and his daughter relates a story where he actually got to stay at Frank Lloyd Wright's home. He was what we might call a Frank Lloyd Wright fanboy, was very excited to be able to meet him and spend time at his home. And he even brought books for Frank Lloyd Wright to sign. And of course, Frank Lloyd Wright being Frank Lloyd Wright, he took the books. He did sign them for Cliff May, but instead of handing them back, he tossed them on the floor and expected Cliff May to pick them up off the floor. It's also important for us to just talk real quick about Chris Choate. So the prefabricated system was actually a joint venture between Cliff May and an architect named Chris Choate. So there really is a real licensed architect behind these houses. Um, Not much is said about Chris Choate because unlike Cliff May, of course, was very charismatic. He was a great promoter. His name was on everything because his reputation and his charisma sold these homes. But Chris Cho was very much part of the design of the system, but he was really a guy who liked to be in the background and not really talked about much. So what little we know about Chris Choate is that he was an architect, went to the University of Southern California. In his career, he did set design for MGM. Aside from working with Cliff May, he designed many other custom homes and also tract homes for other builders. And he spent the latter portion of his career as a tenured professor at UCLA. He was also a very skilled renderer, so you'll see a few renderings here shortly, and all of those ink renderings that we're going to see were done by him. We don't know how much of the system was conceived of or designed by him versus May. I think it was a very collaborative effort. I think a lot of the ideas came from both of them, but we don't really know what the division of labor on the design of the system was. But the system, when we look at like the patents and things like that that they filed, they called it the Cliff May Chris Choate prefabricated system. And so even though it was sold as Cliff May Homes, it very much has his name on it. So the 5 points I'm going to hit this evening are kind of the really big things that I think make these homes interesting to study. One is their informal indoor outdoor living, which of course was mentioned in the advertising that I read, where informality was a real key aspect of the homes, a real departure from other homes being built in the 1950s. A simple and modern architectural language, a low cost prefabricated post and beam construction. The idea here was to be able to make the many ideas that he was bringing to his wealthy clients, his rich and famous clients, to try to bring those same ideas to a system that could be afforded by everybody. Modularity and flexibility and thoughtful planning. And so, talking about informal indoor outdoor living, here's some published photos that are actually from the time. And you can get a sense of what the interiors of these homes looked like in the 1950s. And so when we talk about informality, one of the things you notice is a very open floor plan. Vaulted ceilings. We have these glass gables that actually make the roof look like it's floating over the house. The structure is exposed, and you can see in this photograph, the structure is painted a different color from everything else. So it's really enhanced. Um, and so it's also I should say it's enhanced and it's expressed. So the structures, they're not, nobody's trying to hide the structure very much as part of the vernacular of the house. And then with this open planning, you can see, instead of walling off every room, you have your dining room here in view of your living room. They're not separated out as would be typical in a 1950s home. And then over here, we have this space where the family is outside. And this space, because we can't see all four sides, it's kind of implied, but this is intended as a private outdoor living room. And so all of these Cliff May prefabs were built with this notion of this private outdoor living room, that this space here that the family is in was really intended to be an extension of the living space. And I can tell you in the case of my house, we don't consider our front door to be the front door of the house. It's actually the gate into our courtyard, into our outdoor living room. That's really our front door. And then, of course, the transparency between the two spaces. through this wall of glass here. And so this is looking inside of that same house we were seeing the outside of. You can see this wall of glass just extends the living space naturally to the outside. And that was from I think that was from Parents Magazine, that article. And actually, this brochure is from the Las Vegas tract. And I'm just showing it here because it shows all of these magazine covers that the Cliff May homes were on, which is why they advertise it as the magazine cover home. And then he has quotes from various magazines. Living Magazine, plan to give the most for your money. Better Homes and Gardens, a home designed today for today's living at a price you can pay. House Beautiful says a good example of the emerging American style in architecture. House and Home has perhaps my favorite quote. It says, "This is almost the first low cost house to offer the kind of living almost everybody back east imagines all Californians enjoy." And then Sunset Magazine says more living space by simplicity in structure and material, by simplicity in design, by opening up to the out of doors. And so here are some of the renderings that Chris Choate did to again demonstrate these ideas. This outdoor living room space. He shows a fire pit here, a bench here, another dramatic drawing with the same ideas. He's showing canvas that you could pull over the outdoor space to shade it, operable shading devices. But look at this wall of glass. It's just glass all the way across. And then looking from the inside, again, the indoor outdoor connection he's trying to express here in this drawing. And so we look at how what these homes look like today. I have several photographs from the Denver tract here that I've taken through the years. And so again, not much has changed. And people really, really love these homes for these aspects here. You have this wall of glass here. And so right now we're in this private courtyard. In the case of this house, their front door actually faces the street. It's actually outside the courtyard, unlike my house. But you have these style and rail windows that are connecting indoors to out. And then over here, you have another um, style and rail door and style and rail window. And this is actually the master bedroom. And so you have both the master bedroom and the living room opening up onto this courtyard. And what's really interesting is that I think this is probably a 1,000, maybe 1,100 square foot house. So for a house of such a small size, this is really an unusual quality of life thing to have in what is otherwise meant to be an affordable home. Another example here is check out the transparency. You can also see here the glass gable that lets natural light in here at the end of the house. Again, this is the master bedroom wing. Another example here, informal living. Again, the outdoor living room in another house. You can see this is the front fence, so the street is beyond this fence here. And this is actually that same house we just looked at right here, just a different view. On the left-hand side would have originally been a one-car carport. Now it's been converted into a garage, but they're using a detached carport to help define that space as well. And then this is from the inside of the first home we looked at. So again, we're in the living room and you have that real feel for the transparency to the outside through these style and rail windows. And another one here, this one doesn't have any furniture in it. This one actually was still being restored. And then we have the master bedroom. So behind me, when this photo is taken, behind me is a wall of glass looking onto the courtyard. But you can see even on the other side, we essentially have this ribbon window that's bringing in a ton of light from the other side of the room and the glass gable here. So there's almost, if you want to avoid the outdoors, there's almost no avoiding the connection to the outdoors in these homes. And another example here. This is just a kid's bedroom here. This is a middle room, so this one is far less exciting and sexy than the other rooms. What I wanted to point out here is that even the middle rooms, even the least attractive rooms, still have vaulted ceilings. They still have this window, which is actually a 5 foot wide window, so it's a huge window, even though it doesn't really look like it in this photo. And this is the opposite side of the house, the less sexy side of the house. But you can see here how we have these are two bedrooms in the back here. So we have two 5 foot windows side by side, one for each bedroom. Each bedroom also gets a glass gable. And then this is the master wing here, where again we have that ribbon window in the back of the master bedroom. And again, a master bedroom that connects to that private outdoor space. And here we have on the left-hand side, instead of having a one-car carport, this house is built with a half carport, half garage. And the idea here was that so you have the garage here and then you have the carport here, that this carport, if you didn't want to use it as a carport, it could double as a covered patio, or what I recently learned in Arizona they call a patio port, which is basically a carport that could double as a patio. So again, creating private outdoor rooms by utilizing these these detached garages and carports. And even in the bathrooms. Now, of course, both of these have been renovated, but you have vaulted ceilings and a 5 foot window that goes the whole width of the room, which was an original feature. So every house had a big window in the shower. And this is a shot looking back without the sexy windows, but one thing I wanted to point out here is that every living room in these homes has this soffit, this open soffit up here. And Cliff May originally installed fluorescent lights in that soffit to bounce off of the ceiling. To him, light was a very important issue. And so, in addition to the glass gables, which let in all that wonderful indirect natural light, he also provided these soffits here to bounce light off of so that even at night you could have indirect light coming into your house. And so these homes have a very simple architectural language. And of course, this partially has to do with them being a prefabricated system, them being modular. But I think there was also a very overt intent to make them very simple. And in fact, although I haven't seen any direct quotes, some of the reading that I've done about Cliff May has said that he was keenly interested in these houses not having a definable style. He really wanted them to be very neutral, kind of able to fade into the background so that when the residents of those homes move in and they put in their furniture and they bring their style, that really that becomes the style of the home. So instead of a Victorian home, for instance, where the style of the home is driving how you decorate it, in this case, it was meant to be a blank slate where you could move in and decorate it however you want. And so looking at it from this facade here, the very simple architectural language is everything has the same roof pitch. There's a consistent roof pitch on every roof, including the carports, the detached carports. You have these glass gables, which really make the roof very light and appear to float over the house. You have board and batten siding. There's in the neighborhood. There's a few exceptions to the board and batten siding near the end of the development for reasons we don't know. The builder switched to a T111 siding, which doesn't look as good as the board and batten, but it does the job and it still brings that vertical look to it. But the board and batten is really attractive. And you can't see it in this photo, but the board and batten siding is also a rough sawn siding. So if you look really close, you can see the saw blades on the siding. So that's kind of Cliff May bringing that rustic look into the design of the homes, just very subtly. And then you have the style and rail windows. And I've been doing some thinking as to the why on these style and rail windows, because I think if Cliff May had his way, he would have just made these full walls of glass, similar to how he did with his big custom houses. But the interesting thing about these style and rail windows is that they are actually face nailed onto the structure. So instead of filling a hole, they're actually just nailed right onto the face of the posts and the beams. That actually makes them flush with the adjacent siding, and in fact, if this were painted as it was originally painted, the stile and rail windows would have matched the color of the siding, so it would have essentially been an extension of the siding. But I think it was also done so that the glass would be shippable, so that they could just um, they could easily be flat packed with the rest of the house, which we'll kind of go into those details in a few minutes. Um, and also they could be installed by any idiot. Because part of making prefabricated houses affordable was going to make it so that unskilled labor could put the houses up easily. Instead of requiring, good skilled window installers, these are essentially just already built, so anybody could just nail them up just like a piece of siding. This door originally would have just been a solid slab, but a lot of people through the years have cut windows into them, which I think looks great. This is another look. You can just get a sense of that architectural language. Another bit of it is is that the beams are exposed out of the end of the house. Um, and the beams would have typically been painted the same color as the siding all the way through the house. Or no, the same color as the trim all the way through the house. And of course, the notion of that is so that you get that blurring of indoors and out when you see the same color beam going through this transparent face here. The eaves are a half module, which I'll get into because the houses are also module. They're a half module or 2.5 feet deep on all sides, which is really good because with the eaves this deep, most of the houses still have their original, now 65-year-old siding in good condition generally because water just never touches it. And this is looking at this house is actually on a corner, but one thing is a lot of the photos I've shown you are houses that face the street with that door facing the street, but actually not all the houses face the street that way. In fact, that same end door in this house faces the adjacent house next door. And kind of the last section, I'll get into the whys behind why that is. But there's a really interesting streetscape because not all the houses are in a row like a lot of the other houses in Harvey Park. This house is one of the most popular models because you'll notice the master bedroom wing here has actually 3 windows in a row. That's because this window is a full bathroom that's just for the master bedroom. So it's a full master bedroom suite in its own wing. Again, I think this house may be 1250 in terms of square footage. So this is not a huge house, and yet it has features that you would only expect to find in a big house, like a private master bedroom wing. And just a few on the interior, just a few details to point out. Again, you have these exposed beams. So this is actually, if you could see a little better, this is the actual wood beam. And then this is also a wood beam here because going on the short end of the house, you have these 4x4 tie beams. And so they're left exposed and they were originally painted in a contrasting color. And so the deal with the drywall detailing on that, what they did is they did a slight overlap of the drywall over the beam and then just finished it with a J bead. So, um, when a lot of people renovate these houses, they sometimes mess this up because the contractor doesn't know what to do with this. Doesn't understand why you would just lap a piece of drywall up with a J bead like this. But I think it is a really very elegant and subtle detail. And you can see the same thing done here in one of the more public spaces of the house. So you see all the structure here. You have the 4x4 post, the 4x4 tie beams, the main beam up above, some of the framing for these triangular windows, and then again the drywall just nicely overlapping the structure here. Instead of trying to finish it out with trim, we're trying to figure out what else to do with this. Another thing that messes people up is that this door here, which this is that end door, doesn't have any trim work at all. In fact, what they did is they just put a 4x4 here and used the rough opening to put a door in. So then later on, you have a lot of people try to stuff a pre-hung door into this and can't figure out why it won't work. But I think it's very elegant the way that they did it that way. Yes, it's a little more work for the door installer because sometimes the door may need to be custom cut to fit in this opening, but there's no trim work around this. There's no door frame. The structure is the door frame, and this is consistent throughout the house. The windows and the doors are like this. And so let's get into the system then. Low cost prefabricated post and beam construction. I like this ad. This is actually for a tract in Utah. Um, but they have this photograph here of a house that's been completely flat packed onto a flatbed trailer like IKEA furniture. And then they say 45 days later, here's your house. And so all the parts of the homes were built in a panelized fashion in a factory. And then they were loaded up on these trucks and then shipped out to the site house by house. So that's the prefabrication portion of it. The houses weren't actually manufactured like a manufactured home, but the parts of the houses were manufactured in a factory and then they were shipped out to the site to be erected. And I actually have this. I made this fun fake cover here, looking like an IKEA manual, but I had come across this manual called the oh, I forget what it was called, the Superintendent's Manual for how to build these houses, basically. And it's a step-by-step manual that, like a piece of IKEA furniture, shows you how these houses are built. And so here in the first step, they show, your foundations in place, or in the case of Denver, where we had a foundation within a floor platform built on top of it, your platform is ready to receive the walls. But you have your first modular tilt-up panel in the corner, and you nail that up. And then your second one, and then you continue on tilting up panels until you start to have a house. And you can see here where we're going to be installing the glass. We're just putting up 4x4 posts. Over here, where we have those two windows that come together in the bedrooms, we have actually in this case they're doing full height windows here, but otherwise we would have two other panels tilted up there like these. We have the main posts that hold the main beam that goes across. So they put in the secondary beams here once they have all the panels and the posts up. And you can start to see how we have these rough openings for the windows here now that they're just going to face nail those stile and rail windows on top of as an extension of the siding. Here we have the tie beams, the 4x4 tie beams. And these are also at the ends of the structure here. And then we have the main beam go up on top with some splices in it, depending on the model of the home. And then they put a traditional roof on top. They couldn't find a way. I know Cliff May and Chris Choate wanted to find a way to systematize the roof as well, but they ended up not able to. So it's just a traditional roof on top of that. And then here's an example with the master bedroom wing. Some of the models have a master bedroom wing, some don't. So that's why there's two different variations on that. Here's a stack of panels ready to go. The panels actually had the board and batten siding, well, the boards of the board and batten siding pre-installed when they were delivered on site. So when you tilted up the panel, you already had your siding installed. Here are some just photographs of the factory. So here's a house ready to go. Here we have a house flat packed, ready to go on a truck. And then here's a floor with piles of stile and rail windows here, ready to go. Some workers constructing panels. And here's a demonstration. Cliff May did a few of these demonstrations where he proved that a house could be erected in a single day. And so part of the notion of this is that a builder could put one of these houses up rapidly and also save money that way. And then we have a few other, these photos were a little out of focus, but I think they're really interesting because we're actually seeing the workers here actually tilt up the panels. So there were three different panels. There was the main solid panel here, which was a full height panel with siding installed. We have a window panel, which was actually had 2x4s on either side that go all the way up. And then you have the siding below, and that actually creates your rough opening for the window. And the idea is that so this panel had a 2x4 on the ends, this panel has a 2x4 on the ends. So when those two panels come together, you effectively have a 4x4 post worth of support on a grid along the outside of the house. So another panel about to be tilted up here and nailed in place. And then we start to see the house come together. And again, I apologize. These are out of focus. It was the best I was able to do from the archive. These photos are actually not from Denver. These are in Washington State. And then this is a cool model that Cliff May and Chris Joe built to just demonstrate how the system goes together. So he had all these little components made out of balsa wood or basswood, where he could show that, he could demonstrate to a builder. And one thing, just to give you some context. So while Cliff May built several of these himself, he also licensed builders to build these homes under license. So they could buy the system from him. There were also licensed lumber yards who could manufacture the parts regionally. And so you just, as a builder, you choose what models you want, and you could make all sorts of modifications with the system based on what you wanted to offer in your market. And so this is just demonstrating how, you could change out panels. You could do a corner of windows here and a corner of windows here, or whatever you wanted to do on the module. And just another photograph of the model that he used. This actual model was uh, featured in a Popular Mechanics article that I have a copy of, and so it was kind of cool to see the actual model from that from that photograph. And I took these photographs. There's actually a Cliff May archive in Santa Barbara, California, that has all of his stuff, including models and things like that. And so it was really cool to see all of this stuff. And this is a picture of a house in Denver with the walls open. Somebody decided they wanted to put in insulation in, and so I got to get a look here and actually take this picture. So this is what it looks like with the tilt-up panels put in place. As you can imagine, through the years, especially with people not necessarily understanding how these houses are built, these walls have caused many an electrician and insulation installer headaches trying to figure out why the heck nothing appears to be where it's supposed to be. You can see, so in the outside, the panel had board and batten siding installed. On the inside, what we have on the big solid panel here is cross bracing, and then we have wood blocking put at certain intervals for both the installation of drywall and also the installation of millwork or whatnot that you might want to hang. And so they had so understanding that since you didn't have studs, they at least provided this blocking for any standard things that might go up. And this was a part of every panel. And then we have the window panel here. This, of course, doesn't have its original window in it. And so in Denver, there were 7 models offered. There were actually 8 models offered, but one of them was never built. And I actually live in the smallest model. This 2111 is only 850 square feet when originally built. And you can see it's a very, what's cool about it is that even though I live in what many people might call a tiny house, these high ceilings and things like that, high ceilings, glass walls, and stuff like that actually don't make it feel that small to live in. But so a lot of the photographs I showed you were L-shaped plans, but you can see that the house I live in is not an L-shaped plan, and neither is this one here. This is a 3-bedroom, and then here are some of the L-shaped plans that add on the master suites. And this is the biggest one at only 1,339 square feet, which has 3 bedrooms in this section of the house plus the master suite with the bath. And so a cool exercise to look at is this is where the modularity of these homes comes into play. So everything in these houses is on a 64-inch module. I was calling it 5 feet, but it's not exactly 5 feet. It's a 64-inch module because that's the width of the panel. And so this is my plan here. And to build other models, they essentially just added on to a base plan like this. So the model 2111 could become the 3111, by just adding on this bedroom wing here. So if I go back, you can see what happens. A hallway goes through this bedroom and then goes through this wall here. Oops. A wall is added here, and then you have a bedroom. And then to create the next model with the master suite, we just add another module here to accommodate the bathroom and an extra large closet. And then you have the 3211 model. And then there are variations on this. This wing is always those two options. And then, these living spaces get extended out depending on which model it is. So the biggest model has a couple more modules out for a very large living space plus space for another bedroom right here. And then one other thing to note, and I don't have a good photograph of it, unfortunately. So my model, they oriented all of the houses to accommodate a future addition. And so my house, you could put an addition on, and they even helped you along a little more. So there's that one of those 4x4 tie beams is actually running right here through this bedroom. And then there's a soffit that's actually built in our bedroom right here. And so all we'd have to do is drop a wall with a door in right here underneath that tie beam, and we all suddenly have a hallway, and then we can add on our addition here. And all the houses in the neighborhood were oriented in such a way so that there would be space to add a wing here if you didn't already have one with your model. And so these are other examples of ways that the Cliff May and Chris Cho proposed to modify the system. So in this case, you could extend the house, any number of modules in any direction. So here they're showing extending the house out one module this way, out a module this way, out, make that master bedroom wing even another module longer. Another idea here, extend the roof 2 modules out, but don't extend the wall, and you have a nice big covered patio attached to the house. You could enlarge the bathrooms various ways. In this way, actually extending the wall out underneath the half module eave here, just to make the bedroom a little or the bathroom a little longer, because the bathroom is pretty small originally. Various different kitchen arrangements, because again, this is post and beam construction, so you can move things around any way that you want, as long as you're not affecting the original structure. And then different ways you could attach if you didn't want to attach a detached garage or carport, different ways that you can attach it to the house, all in a modular way. So there's a lot of flexibility with these houses. This method here actually has a patio port adjacent to the house, and then a garage here, for instance. And then also ways that if you went the detached route, you could extend the roof and create a breezeway or something like that. Again, all staying on using the modular system. And then he even proposed ways that you could put in overhead elements, just like for instance, just a pergola here connecting the house to the detached garage or something like that. And then I think I put this here so that I could talk about that the ability to add an addition, but I already talked about that here. So this is a figure ground that I created of the neighborhood. This was for a home tour. I've actually hosted several home tours of the Cliff May homes through the years, and I created this map to identify where the homes were. But I also extended the map out because I think it's really interesting to see what's happening here in figure ground. Because of the minimum setbacks that were typical in the 1950s and even typical today, a majority of Harvey Park is like this, where you have houses in a perfect row all the way up and down every street. But you'll notice that's not the case with these houses. These houses are dramatically different in the way that they're placed on the lot. And as you go up and down the street, what you notice even more is some houses are turned in different ways on the lot. And in fact, that's what I was going to show with these plans here. I wanted to point out real quick that this is the main door at the end house here, and then we have a door here, and we have a door here. Any three of these doors could be your front door. And so these doors were all added. All these exterior doors were added to provide that flexibility. So in this figure ground here, we have houses that are turned in different ways. Not every house has that front door facing the street. Some houses have the door facing the side. Some houses are way in the back of the lot. Some houses are way in the front of the lot. Some houses are turned 90 degrees. And so you have that variety all the way up and down the street. And what that variety took into account was not only um, the relationship of the houses to the street, but also the relationship of the houses to each other. And so they even, when they had to fight cities that might not let them do this, they even, this is just a draft of their document, but they have this reasons for modifications of setbacks for Cliff May homes. And they talk about, all too often we see site layouts of this type and show the houses in a perfect row. This effectively separates the houses in street A from those on houses with street B, but the problem of rear yard separation is hardly ever critical, while the problem of space between adjacent houses almost always is. The condition becomes critical when bedrooms look into bedrooms, living rooms look into living rooms. On the other hand, if we stagger the houses in relationship to one another like this, although it costs the builder more to do, we achieve a better appearance from the street, as well as getting more space, more light, more air, more privacy, more protection against sounds and noise, and our views are more distant ones, looking into open spaces rather than into a building wall or the windows of the house next door. And so again, this is where I was saying before that these houses are about ideas. And one of those ideas was that it's critical to think about the outdoor space when you're building a house, and critical to think about the views outside the windows. And guess what? You can actually accomplish this with a tract home. And so they show different ways that these outdoor living rooms could be placed, that a house could be placed on the site. And even this is just very diagrammatic notion of how a street could be laid out without houses interacting with each other so closely. And the arrows show the variations I was talking about with what your front door could be. This one in particular and this one, they actually have the front doors on the sides. And so we take a closer look at the figure ground here, and we see that type of thing happening here. So you have some houses that address the street like this. And you have some houses that address the street like this. This isn't my house, but this is similar to how my house addresses the street. This would have been originally the half carport, half garage, but this was converted into living space at some point. But this gate, this is their front door into their outdoor living room. This is what the house looks like behind that gate. So the house is very transparent and open to the outside, but you'd never know it from the street. And some of the houses address the street like this. The front door for this house is over here on the end of the house. Although you could use this door right here as a front door. Typically, in this one, people actually come around to the side and go in the side of the house. And this house addresses the street again. This one's way in the back of the lot. You can see the front door, but it's not right up against the lot. And so I've already run way over what I anticipated, which is, and believe it or not, this is a truncated presentation anyway. And so I probably left you with a lot of questions and wanting to see more. And so here's my email address. If you want to jot that down, I'll be happy to answer any questions you have or send you anything you want to see if you want to see any of these documents that I shared and things like that. Also, Modern in Denver's current issue features a Cliff May home, a beautiful one, the biggest model, wonderfully restored and remodeled. So take a look at that if you have the latest copy of Modern in Denver, or go pick up the latest copy. Or if you email me, I can send you a link to an online edition of the magazine if you want to see it. And then I have a couple of Instagram accounts that I regularly post things to as well. So we'll open up to any questions if anybody has those. But otherwise, thank you for your time and your interest in the Cliff May homes in Harvey Park.
Thank you, Adam. Let's hear a round of applause for our speaker. I'm gonna quickly adjourn the meeting, and then everybody is welcome to hang out, and we can ask Adam questions until 1 o'clock in the morning, right? Can I hear a A motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Gotta hear a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.
That was great, Adam.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Well
Adam-
done, Adam.
One thing that I imagine got cut from your original version of the talk is, could you talk a little bit about the colors and any oversight that Cliff May and his folks had on the color selection for the buildings?
So yeah, and actually I should have had them. I don't know where I have them at the moment. They're somewhere here in my office. I have what some of the original colors were, but all the houses were originally painted, and the colors were offered in a what might best be described as actually a color system that that Chris Choate actually takes credit for developing. And so instead of just choosing what each aspect of your house is going to be, you were given 7 or 8 options for what the color, I guess we could say what the colorway of your house is going to be. So you pick one set of colors, and then everything is based off of that. So the exterior of your house, the trim, all of the interior walls, even the choice of your cabinet colors and your countertop colors, and everything were all coordinated by Chris Choate. And I have a great black and white photograph that actually shows there's like a big display board that shows all the different color options, but unfortunately it's in black and white, so you can't actually see what all the colors are.
That's neat. Was there any stipulations to not having a color next to another color?
That much I don't know. If there were rules that said you couldn't have 2 houses that are the same color next to each other.
Adam, so you probably mentioned this. Was there any type of average or kind of guideline for how many days it would take to, put up these homes once materials and products were received on site? I mean, that one example that was a, 1 day put up diagram. I mean, that is, unbelievable. So just
Yeah, I would
my
think
curiosity.
everything would have had to have gone perfectly right for that to happen.
Right.
Yeah, we don't have any hard facts on how long it took. Cliff May would say that a house could be erected in 24 hours, and then it was another 2 weeks for finish out. But of course, even that ad I showed you from Utah was quoting more like 40 some days for a house to be completed. So we don't know much about what um, the real time was. And the one, we have a couple of original owners still in the neighborhood, and I got to sit down with one of the couples a couple of years ago, and one thing they mentioned is that, and this is something I wasn't able to touch on because of the time, is that the houses were delayed pretty significantly because of constant labor strikes that were happening. And while he couldn't go too much into detail as to the whys behind the labor strikes, one thing I know is that local trade unions, particularly home building trade unions, were very much against prefabricated houses in general. We know, for instance, the developer of Arapahoe Acres, Edward Hawkins, before he developed Arapahoe Acres, he had partnered with somebody and attempted to do a prefabricated home, and they were pretty much shut down by the trade unions before they could even get the first house off the ground. And so, the developer of these homes, which I didn't have time to go into, Frank Burns, was very influential, I would say very powerful in the local home building business. And yet it's surprising even he was able to pull off a huge prefabricated project like this, given how against prefabricated homes the local trade unions were. So I suspect that the houses took a whole lot longer than they should have because of strikes and other resistance by local trade unions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Adam, you mentioned the setbacks and that there was a diagram to explain why the Cliff May homes worked well without necessarily meeting the setbacks. Was that a big issue? I know Sternberg dealt with that multiple occasions on zoning regulations. Was that something that they ran into regularly when they would try and build these homes?
Yeah, we actually don't know. One thing we do know is that the homes actually break several zoning rules, not only for setbacks, but also, a lot of them have these privacy fences in front, which actually go against local zoning rules. And I've never actually found where they got the variances, but they must have gotten several variances when they built the tract. In fact, if anybody is good at tracking that kind of information down, I would love to find it. Um, but yeah, they definitely had to have had several variances in place to do what they did in Harvey Park. But I don't have any evidence or details on it at this point. I would love to find that.
Adam, what was the foundation? I'm assuming they didn't have basements, but did
So so in California, where these houses originated, all the foundations are slab on grade.
right.
They're also slab on grade in a few other areas like Texas. But here in Denver, all the houses are on crawl spaces. And I don't know why they decided to go with crawl spaces. My guess is that um, because they would have had to put footers below the frost line anyway, you might as well just dig the rest out and not have to deal with the troubles of slab on grade with electrical and plumbing and all that anyway. So that's just a guess. I don't have any evidence for that, but yeah, they're all built on crawl spaces here in Denver.
Slab on grade's hard to do in this here.
Yeah.
The spills are just so bad. Yeah.
And did he have any input about the landscaping? I mean, seemed really concerned about the site design. What about
He did have input on the landscaping. And I don't have many details on that, but definitely had input as to where fences were going to go, where hardscapes were going to go. I don't know if he had much input on where like trees and plantings were going to go, but definitely the fences and hardscapes were well defined.
So back to your comment about the color palette, Adam. Are there? You mentioned it was just a picture in black and white of their color palette, but is there any other documentation of what they originally were?
I actually do have many of the original colors. If you want me to bring them down and show them to you at some point. I have this great list that I found in the archive that actually listed all the colors by a California paint company called Dunn Edwards. And they were kind of Cliff May's go-to paint company. And I sent them the list, and they very generously sent me back the modern versions of all of the colors on the list. So I actually ordered samples of all of those colors, and so I know mostly what they are. What I don't know is how they are coordinated. I don't know what's interior, what's exterior, what was trim. I don't know what went where, but I do know what many of the colors are.
Okay, cool. I'll have to reach out to you about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Adam, question for you. Do you know how they handled the HVAC and plumbing and that when they did the slab on grade? Did they change the prefab? As I know, like in our house in Florida, the HVAC is in a very different setup than you would ever see it in Colorado. And I don't know if they changed the panels or anything, any of the setup for that.
Yeah, how it's done with slab on grade is there is a small kind of core to the house. And I don't know if I could probably bring up the floor plan to show where, but over that core is a kind of small attic. And so they were able to run all the duct work through that attic area to the various rooms through the house. So it's all done in the kind of the upper areas. Whereas in Denver, all the HVAC is run through the floor. It's just run through the crawl space. And so what they would do also is the there's like a little hall closet that's in the middle of the house that's in that core. And that hall closet originally housed the water heater and the furnace or air conditioner or whatever. Um, Whereas in Denver, they did a crawl space furnace, which people just love changing the filters on, I'm told. My house has a boiler. Somebody changed our furnace out for a boiler, so I don't have to deal with that. But and then they left the water heater still up in that hall closet in the main level.
Adam, I'm curious on the kitchen, like the floating wall. Did that follow like the 5'4" rhythm you talked about, or sort of those panels? And I'm wondering if you have any information on height as to where they decided to bring it up to 5 foot and change, and why.
I don't know the whys. I think you are right that it was about 5 feet tall.
I mean, I'm 6'4", and yeah, I mean, I can clearly see over it, but it was curious as yeah, why you picked such a height.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any insight on that other than, I Cliff May was already being very bold in having that pony wall instead of a full height wall around the kitchen. In the 1950s, it would have been very typical to have a full height wall around your kitchen, and so whereas the very open kitchens that we have today, most of the houses don't have that pony wall anymore. Um, that would have been unheard of in the 1950s. That would have been like super cutting edge. But even just having the pony wall is would have been considered cutting edge in the 50s. So my guess is he was trying to open it up as much as he possibly could without pushing it. I mean, and that's just my guess on the topic, but I think he wanted to make it as low as he possibly could without people freaking out about the openness.
I think spatially, that pony wall does a lot for the way those living rooms lay out. Like you walk into that place and with the wall, there's one piece of it that you don't see everything, you know? An 800 square foot house, you walk in and if it's all open, okay, I got it. Boom, done.
Yep.
But there's something neat to, something happens. There's an experience with keeping that revealed, hidden, and then you go and you find it.
That is a good point. Yeah, and we live in that little model, and so we ended up tearing down our wall a few years ago. And at least in the small model, it really made a difference in opening the space up because it's a small space, and so I feel like it was a plus to have that wall down. But I think in the bigger living rooms, I think it could really make a difference to leave that wall up.
Adam, were there any built-ins or did he continue to design and build furniture for the houses?
He did not, as far as I'm aware, he did not do any more furniture building or design, that I'm aware of through the rest of his career. I think he mostly just focused on the houses themselves, but he was always an inventor and tinkerer. So he was always trying to invent new gadgets and things. His own homes were very much experimental. That's something we really couldn't go into. I didn't have time to go into, but he was always experimenting on his own family homes. And so probably I think his most interesting house was a house that I think was called the experimental house or something like that, where the house actually had no permanent walls inside of it. So it was like one big space, and then it had a huge operable skylight above the middle of the space. And then there were movable walls slash like cabinets that could then be moved around to create the rooms. And so if they wanted to throw a party, they could push all that aside and they'd have one big room, or then they could push everything back and put the bedrooms back essentially. So it was like big, like shelves and cabinets on wheels. And so, he was always experimenting with different things that way. So yeah, while his focus wasn't necessarily on furniture, he was always trying out new things, which I think is really interesting, especially for somebody who's not a trained architect or anything like that.
Why did he quit doing these tracks?
So, I don't have a solid explanation. I have like a mix of things that I've managed to put together. One is that he was really struggling to scale. Um, with I found a bunch of documents in the archive where a lot of the builders that were licensed to build his houses were unhappy with him, and they were even meeting on their own to try to figure out like how can we get Cliff May to cooperate with us. um, because they were having trouble with the royalties he was charging, the licensing fees he was charging. They felt like they were too high, and they felt like they were struggling to make money on the system ultimately. It was supposed to be this low cost system to be affordable, but ultimately what seems to even happen with prefab houses today, the numbers just never seem to quite work, and they were really struggling with that. And so I think there was that part of it. Um but there's an interview of Cliff May that was taken kind of near the end of his life, I think in the 1980s. It's a really long and interesting interview to listen to. But the only thing that addresses the prefabbed homes in that interview is he was asked about them, and he said that what he really found disappointing about doing them was that he loved getting to know his clients and designing for his clients. And so trying to design for just a generality, I don't think excited him as much as every house being an interesting and unique project. So I think, the fact that he was losing excitement for the whole system combined with all of the struggles he was having to make the business work was like, I think he put his hands up and said, you know what, I'm going to go back to my designing custom homes thing because that's a whole lot more fun than dealing with all this. He did an interview, you can find it online. He did an interview with the New York Times. They wrote an article on him in the 1980s, kind of looking back on his career, and he had a great quote in that article that I think is probably more applicable today than ever. That really reflects his style, but also just reflects what I think my view on modernism is, and I think a lot of other people's view is he said, "A house doesn't have to look modern to be modern. And a modern looking house is not necessarily modern." And I think nothing could be more true today, especially with a lot of the crap being built in Denver that we would call modern looking houses, but are certainly not modern in any way, shape, or form.
So are the larger houses, the custom houses, are they as interesting as fun, innovative as the tract houses?
Oh, I think they're very interesting houses. I mean, I could bring up the photographs again from my presentation of the Ocotillo house. So you can see again here, and of course, this is just small vignettes of this house, which is a huge house. A lot of the custom homes he did were gigantic, 10,000 square feet and bigger. But you see his combination of using rustic materials, um, and then these wonderful walls of glass that are almost surprising among all of these rustic materials that he uses. And I love this um, exposed aggregate concrete that then there's a grid in it that then runs outside. So it's, again, that's producing that indoor outdoor connection. You've got the high vaulted ceilings, this wonderful fireplace in the corner here that is, again, both rustic and modern. And then you have this bedroom here, which I think is really interesting because he's actually doing some board and batten siding inside the bedroom on kind of a pony wall that I'm assuming there's probably like a bathroom or something behind that. And then the use of this is very common for him to do, was the use of grape stakes, both on like pergolas outside, or in this case, is actually using it on the house as a overhang. And if you find, I don't know if do I have it here?
Well, the textured wall, right? It's not shadow. Is that?
Actually, that's shadow from the grape stakes overhead.
Oh, okay.
I love that look. I think it looks just so unique and so awesome.
It is really unique. And then I have a book here too that there's been a few books written about Cliff May, and this is one of them, but like this is an example of one of his custom homes. And this is a detail that he did frequently where he actually runs a skylight down the gable, then going to a glass end of the house, which I think is just an incredible detail when we're talking about natural light and opening things to the outdoors. That's, of course, well above and beyond what he did with the prefabricated homes that he designed.
What's
Let's see if I could find his design for the Sunset headquarters here.
what's weird to me, Adam, is that he did a finished ceiling in these ones here in Denver. Inside of those, you'd think
Yeah.
that would have just been uh, the underside of the sheathing.
Yeah, and he, in the biggest tract in Long Beach, it actually is the underside of the well, not sheathing, but there's actually tongue and groove roof deck and exposed beams in that tract. But that didn't seem to be carried over into any of the other tracks, and I don't know if that just ended up being a money issue or what. Oh, here's another good. Well, no, I just lost it. I was going to show a photograph that was good to show what he was trying to emulate with the whole courtyards. All right, well, here's a good one here. So, like, this is not an atypical plan for the houses that he designed. So you can see again, it's a house really designed around a courtyard, like an old Mexican ranch home. And so this is what he was trying to emulate in an affordable tract home. Of course, he couldn't build the house all around a single courtyard like that because of the size of the home, but he was trying to create that effect anyway.
Isn't that one in Kansas?
Um, that one might have been in Texas. Now, of course, I have to find the page again.
So question, is there any insulation in the house at all as far as the prefab naturally, or is it just the walls as they are? Because obviously I've seen inside the walls, but I haven't ever actually seen if there's anything in the roof or anywhere else, or is it
There is fiberglass insulation in the roof.
okay.
The walls were built with zero insulation.
So do you think that's maybe why he didn't do the exposed structure in the roof, is to give a little bit of insulation for the colder climate?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly stands to reason that that would have been a better way to insulate than just having an exposed roof deck. Although I know there are even tracks in California where he ended up going to just the drywall ceilings. So I think there may be more to it than just that. But yeah, that was my initial assumption.
Mm-hmm. Because I know obviously the roof above me is actually a little bit of roof with then like the false kind of post and beam look with this house with the option, and then we have our tiny 2-foot attic next to it. But
Yeah, I mean, Crisana Park and Linwood are good examples too of that's where they did expose the tongue and groove roof deck, and really the only way you can insulate those is by putting a layer of rigid foam on top of the roof.
which works.
It does.
Good.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And actually, the roof that are on the Cliff May homes, that's one of the kind of frustrating design defects. Is because there's no attic and the roof is just filled with insulation. There's no real good means for getting moisture out of it, which can lead to some issues. So, Cliff May did cut vents into the eaves, but they don't really do anything because there's nowhere for the air to go.
Yeah.
So that has been one of the little frustrating defects in the design of these houses, but it's one of the very few defects. Overall, I've been very impressed by the system after having lived in it for 16 years.
Yeah, it's impressive because there's so much in that that's idiot proof, like lap drywall, doing a J.
I mean, the J bead is you have to have a little bit of skill to do the J bead, but you bring that one guy to do that part, but any idiot can then slap the drywall up. The siding's already mostly installed. The windows are just nailed up.
Was there any of them that had plywood instead of drywall in them?
Not that I'm aware of, but it wouldn't have surprised me if that was Chris Choate's original intent. And the only reason I say that is because not long after they developed this system, Chris Choate was actually doing projects to demonstrate the abilities of plywood for the National Plywood Institute or whatever it was called. I found several demonstrations that Chris Choate did of different things that he experimented with plywood. So it wouldn't have shocked me if that was his original intent, was to use plywood where the drywall was used. But I'm not aware of any place where that was actually done. And I do have one photograph here of this is the Sunset Magazine headquarters here that he designed. And that's in modern day Silicon Valley. And unfortunately, they moved out of this building, I think 4 years ago now. So I don't know what its fate has been since then. But a lot of people are worried, it being in Silicon Valley, that perhaps its days are numbered.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam, I think at this point you could probably put together one of these houses and just start prefabbing your own cool place.
I know, I've thought about it. Like, why not? I can just start building some panels and do my addition.
This thing could so easily be SIPs.
Totally. I think at the end of the day,
Easily. You'd face the same problems I'm sure he did with doing the master plan the way that you want it, but
yeah.
you could easily do these things with SIP.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an early version of what became SIPs. I mean, it's a modular panelized construction. But it would be amazing if, like, he could have already had the wiring in it and everything like that. Like, that just takes it to the next level.
Yeah, that's wild.
I mean, if you look at the things they do with log homes now and mountain homes and being able to be modular and put on a basement, I don't see why these wouldn't work. I mean, truthfully, if I had millions of dollars, I'd be like, I'm going to buy a piece of land and I'm going to make affordable housing. But we all know how well that would go over. So,
Yep. The cost of the land already puts you at a disadvantage, unfortunately.
It's easy to think to forget that these things are so damn old.
Right. They're 65 years old.
Like, you think, okay, well, you could have done, it would be so much better if he would have, like the last ones that are T111, like you'd think, yeah, that makes the most sense. It would just be T111 and you could just plug standard store-bought windows into those openings. But this was legitimately more cost effective to do it this way than to do it with the off the shelf stuff, I guess.
Right. I think it was to a certain extent. Like, if you were building them one off, perhaps not. But if you could get a factory building parts at scale, then yeah.
Very good.
I mean, that's the key to it, is scaling it.
Oh, what were the roofs on these things?
They're just, what do you mean? The roofs, at least in Denver, they were a tar and gravel roof originally. Very few have them left now. And they were, not only were they tar and gravel, but they, and this is a detail that you can still find it on a handful of houses, surprisingly, but they also had concealed gutters. So, all the houses now have metal gutters mounted to the outside, but originally the gutters were actually concealed. It was a trough behind the fascia. But I think a lot of them ended up failing and just rotting the fascia board, and so there are very few left where you can find that detail. But there is still a handful of them.
Surprised they even did gutters on them with those overhangs as big as they are.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need them.
although haven't they shown in Colorado, because our soil's so expansive, the more you can push your water away from your house, even past your eaves, the better off your entire house is ultimately going to be.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah. Although when your eaves are 2.5 feet, that's plenty.
Do you think those houses that have that concealed gutter still probably likely have some wood rot going on and probably are going to have to see them gone anyways.
It's possible. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they still had downspouts that then came out of the gutters and then did what a traditional downspout does, is ran it back to the side of the house and then down and then out. So that part, the vertical part wasn't concealed, but the part along the roof was concealed. And I hate how the metal gutters look on the outside of it, so
What do
I
you
mean,
have for
I
now?
like the way gutters look.
yeah, generally hate. I just hate how there's only that one K style gutter. I would at least like a metal box or something.
Yeah, I find that gutters are one of the harder things to make attractive on anything, unfortunately.
It's just the lack of options. Like there's the one option. How is it that there's only one option?
We need to look at Josh in this conversation and make him reinvent a gutter for us.
You got to design it with the gutter in mind, and he did. Clearly. Because otherwise it would have just had that cheap, just a regular, standard gutter.
Yeah.
That was a design choice to do that. But I am surprised that they even have them at all. And I wonder if the other tracks do.
That's a good question. I don't know offhand.
I could see that having been the builder that did these saying that the house needed to have a gutter because the house it's going to be better. It rains here. I like this house in California.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't know. I don't have a laundry list of all the regional changes he had to make. You know, there's a tract of these in Dallas. There's a tract of these in there's a very small tract of them in Kansas City. So, where it definitely rains a lot. So, it could have been a detailed change that was made by Cliff May and Chris Choate for other locations.
Yeah. It's fantastic. They're fantastic houses. And you think like, the spatial conditions inside them are that sophisticated. The thing, it's product design.
Yep, very
and
much so.
that house is a big piece of furniture.
It is.
It's kind of surprising unless he was just like, you know what, I did this approach long enough. I want to go do something different. It's surprising to hear that I did the product stuff. I want to do custom and deal with people and stuff.
Yeah, it seems like he really enjoyed that, after hearing that interview, that it was, I think he was very charismatic, like extroverted personality. So, he kind of fed off of that, I think. But I think after living in the system for 16 years and just continuing to see, how intelligently it was put together, I continue to be impressed by it. And of course, I continue to share about it because I'm impressed by it. But I just think it was really well conceived. And a big part of that was that it's not so much about the house or the architecture, it's about the ideas behind it. It's about he was thinking beyond the house, but really what it's like to live in a house. It really is, to him, it was about quality of life. And I can say, I live in a tiny house, and I live in a tiny house with my wife and 2 boys, and we really love it. We even admit that our house is way too small, but we still love our house. It lives really well, really well.
The question is, where do you store everything, or do you become that much of a minimalist that you just don't store things anymore?
That is a struggle. The crawl space helps.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not good at being a minimalist, as I think I've told you.
Yeah, you definitely. In fact, what's funny is when we bought our house, the people who lived in it were definitely not minimalists. Because they had furniture and even like a piano sitting in front of the window walls. So they treated the house as if the window walls weren't even there. So that in that way, you really have to be a minimalist because you really have to cut back your furniture because there are fewer places to put furniture. One thing we bemoan a little bit is there are fewer places to put artwork. There are very few walls to actually put artwork on when your house is glass.
I learned that a little bit with our Florida house. I got art for it and then realized there weren't as many. Um, and I'll admit, in this house, we don't have a TV upstairs because you can see our living room is the whole front wall of the house is pretty much glass up here, and then we have bedrooms, and so it's not like there's that much room for it. It's not as much glass as a Cliff May by any stretch of the imagination, but truthfully, our main floor is a similar floor plan to what they have going on. We just have the basement below us. So I think a lot of people took that kind of 1,100 square foot, 3-bedroom floor plan and made it the main floor and then added basements or not based on VA approval and that kind of thing. But I don't know, were the Cliff Mays even approved by the GI Bill for GI housing?
They were approved by the VA and FHA. Yeah. I don't know how far that approval went because, of course, sometimes the challenge was just that they were under appraising. But I do know that Cliff May and Chris Choate at least got preliminary approval from them. I just don't know what happened regionally because there are a lot of tracts that were, for unexplained reasons, unrealized, where they built 5 or 6 houses and never built any more. And I suspect regionally, VA and FHA approval may have affected that.
What was the price point on the base model here?
Let me look here. I have it in my PowerPoint. You mean for my model, the smallest home? So the range I show on this ad, although it varies from ad to ad, but is 12,750 to 16,750.
What year?
That would be in 55.
So that's interesting that they were. Do you think it's because it was in Denver proper that they were more expensive or about the same as these houses with basements over here in Littleton?
I think that was part of it. I think the fact that they were these name brand Cliff May homes was part of it.
They were really that much?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think these started at $11,000, but they were 1,100 square feet with no basement and a carport if they were $11,000.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah, you definitely could get more bang for your buck elsewhere, which is interesting.
Now, granted, our house may have been in the middle of BFE when it was built, so I can't.
Oh, that's possible too.
That house, Kimber.
Huh? Ours is off of we're between Broadman University and Arapahoe and Orchard.
What year is it?
What year? 1960. Yeah, so I know. Now, I have no idea because the flyers that I have don't say what the contemporary model cost. They just say, ranging from 11,000 to I think it was like 16,500. And it says with options like dual fireplaces, the cathedral ceiling. Every house comes with at least a carport, but you have options for a 1-car, a 2-car garage. So everything had all of those options, and so I would assume the 16 would be pushing the 2-car garage and the full basement and probably the fireplaces.
Well, here's the funny thing that I also couldn't go into is Burns, who developed the Cliff May homes in Denver. He was actually competing against himself in the same neighborhood. He was building what, by all appearances, are a knockoff of the Cliff May homes. They have the same roof pitch, glass gables, very similar floor plans, although he did offer a tri-level model as well. He offered them with brick exteriors, optional basements. They had window walls. From an architectural detailing standpoint, they are by no means the same. Not near as the same level of quality, but he was able to do all that, offer those things that people see as value adds, like brick exteriors and stuff like that, for cheaper. Those started at 11,000. And I actually talked to an original owner in one of those houses, and he said, "Yeah, we looked at the Cliff May homes. We thought they were really nice, but they seemed really expensive." And he said that the salesman at the Cliff May office sent him to the adjacent tract that Burns was building of those of those alternative mid-century modern homes to go look at those, and they ended up buying one of those. So I think even Burns may have found some frustration in the affordability of what he was able to do with the Cliff May homes, which may all go back to those letters I found of the licensees having difficulties making the Cliff May homes work from a financial standpoint.
It was
Um,
probably getting the panels built.
It may have been. It may have been. And we still to this day don't know where the panels in Denver were manufactured.
I bet that was the expense. If they would have had SIPs or a panel that didn't have to be custom, that would have been
Yeah. Or if Cliff May could have really scaled up and, manufactured all the panels in one location or something like that. Of course, the trouble there is that interstate shipping wasn't near as reliable as it is today. So, that probably wasn't really a reasonable idea. But, I think he had a scale problem. He just couldn't scale it up enough to make it work financially.